So I don't know if you know, but Building 7 was the third building that fell on 9/11. So there was the Twin Towers that they say two planes brought them down. And there was another building that a plane didn't hit, but it fell into its own footprint. Let me show you how it happened. So
for the third time today.
And watch this.
It's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
And there it is. And that's Dan Rather, literally as it's coming down, falling into its own footprint. He goes, well, those buildings look like when we see a building demolished on television, like it's coming down. I wonder why it looked like that. You know why? Because it was.
Wait, Charlie Sheen, when he said looks to me, he was the same as Dan Rather, Charlie Sheen saying that?
Yes.
Did they actually use the word brought down? And who was it that was telling you this?
The fire department. The fire department.
This is,
and,
there it is. These are all different angles. You see all the explosions? So those are all different angles of Building 7 coming down. Here's another one.
Shockwave ripping through the building and the windows all busted out.
Now the interesting thing, here's another version. Here's another angle. Now if you think that building fell into its own footprint because a plane hit another building, I've got a vaccine I'd like to sell you.
Skyscraper implosion looked like it had been done by a demolition crew. The whole thing just collapsing down on itself.
So I just wanted to show you, this was predicted. So BBC, 20 minutes before that building fell, the BBC did this. Now, this is the only video I could get of it. I'm going to apologize for these graphics being there. But the BBC predicted they were broadcasting in real time, and they said that Building 7 had already fallen. They called it the Solomon Building because it was owned by this guy Solomon. So watch this.
Heard a few moments ago was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing, and indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were, and it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building?
Now when they throw it to her, Building 7, the Solomon Brothers building, is still standing over her shoulder, and they're talking as if it had already fallen. So let's watch.
Behind that, there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of this city, but completely disappeared now, and New York is still unable to take on board what has happened to them today.
Presumably there were very few...
So that was the BBC and in real time on television telling you that the Building 7 had already fallen when it hadn't fallen yet.
They didn't know what it was. They didn't know what it was because they're from England, right?
So So watch this. So now this is from Alaska. This is a news report debunking that.
Well, it's been a point of controversy now for more than a decade. A researcher now from the University of Alaska Fairbanks is weighing in.
World Trade Center Building 7 was not struck by a plane, but did collapse hours after the Twin Towers. Well, now Dr. Leroy Hulsey, a civil engineering professor at UAF, he led a 4-year study which reevaluates whether Building 7's collapse could have been caused by fire, as was determined by the National Institute for Standards and Technology in 2008. Hulsey says his findings were a resounding no, and his simulations paint a different picture than the federal agencies.
So we virtually simulated the building, and we looked at that analysis, and we also virtually simulated what they did. We couldn't get it to do what they did.
A group called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth paid for the study. The organization is petitioning Congress to call for a new investigation into the World Trade Center destruction. A spokesperson for the organization says one of its supporters approached Dr. Hulsey about the research, partly because of UAF's reputation.
When we started talking to Dr. Hulsey, it became very clear that the engineering program at University of Alaska Fairbanks was very strong. And Dr. Hulsey was the chair of the department, and he had a lot of experience in modeling structures and doing forensic investigations. And so we thought it was a perfect opportunity for us to move forward.
The study is now open for a 2-month public comment.
So how bad is a job has the establishment been doing? They've done so bad that even normies are looking into what really happened with Building 7. Every major narrative of the United States government is collapsing like Building 7. And let me bring on Dr. Leroy Hulsey. He is a professor emeritus of structural engineering at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, who has investigated the failure of the World Trade 7 building, Center Trade 7 building, the third building to collapse on September 11th, 2001. A recent study from Dr. Hulsey and his colleagues from the University of Alaska Fairbanks challenges the official explanation for World Trade Center 7's collapse. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So now, so you have impeccable reputation. The people who are interested in this came to you. Did you have your own, just watching it on 9/11, did you have any doubt that it was happening the way that the establishment news was telling us it was happening?
To be honest with you, I didn't even know a Building 7 had collapsed.
Oh, really?
Really.
Okay.
I did not know that. You know, and particularly when they started telling me about this building, I said, I don't think I'm going to do this. So then they came back to me again, and I said, I don't think I'm going to do this. And then on the third time, I said, okay, I'll put together a proposal. I decided, okay, I'm old enough that if they take me out, no big deal. So anyway, I just said, okay, and I put together a proposal, and they accepted that proposal to do the work through the University of Alaska Fairbanks as a research project. So through that process, and I went and I got it funded. Then I looked at the normal way of doing things and looking for students to work with me. And I had a lot of undergraduate students that really, really were excited about it. But when they took it to their families, they decided they better not. They were a little worried. So then I ended up with 2 PhD students, both from China. And they worked with me. And they both are now teaching it in China. So go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I just wanted, so here is Building 7. And it's, as they said on the BBC, it's a few hundred yards away from the World Trade Center 1 and World Trade Center 2. So the idea that somehow an explosion happening over here a few hundred yards away would somehow make that building fall into its own footprint is suspect, to say the least. Now, is there anything you want to say about this slide before I go to the next one?
Well, I wanted to, first of all, share with people exactly where Building 7 was with respect to WTC 1 and WTC 2. And this picture illustrates it in a not necessarily in a dimensional sort of way, but a visual sort of way, to give a person an understanding of look, at this building's only 47 stories tall. I mean, and that's tall, quite frankly. 2 million square feet per floor.
Wow, it's a big building.
A big building. So in reality, what I told the AE 9/11 Truth, who was funding this, I said, I'll do the investigation, but I will not promise that I'll tell you what caused it. I will tell you what didn't cause it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I did not want to. Here's the bottom line. There was no way I was going to get involved in any politics. This was going to be pure science all the way.
Okay.
And every day that we did a study, I asked my students, I hope you didn't read anything about this, because we're not going to be we're not going to let anything that's being published affect the science that we're doing.
Okay. So should I move on to the next slide?
Yes.
So here it says this is the World Trade Center, different elevation views. There's the 45th floor, the 19th, 16th, and 13th floor. And so what do you want to tell people about this slide?
Well, first of all, 45 is about where we saw that there wasn't any, you'll see here later that they're talking about the penthouse, which is on top of the building. And it came down before the rest of the building. And what we spent a long time trying to determine what was going on with that penthouse, because it had so much interaction for a lot of people as to what went on there, and a lot of people thought it was connected, I guess, to building to column 79, which was down below, and in actuality, that penthouse collapsed before, which means that there was not any fire that impacted that penthouse. Okay, so then one has to ask themselves what created that problem. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So when you look at the video of Building 7 collapse, it collapses at the top first, not at the bottom first. And You're saying there was no fire up on the 45th floor.
No.
Okay.
So, that opens up a whole series of questions, does it not?
Yes.
At the end of the beginning. So anyway, I'm done with this. I just wanted to show, and also at 19, 16, and 13, or 15, what is it?
19, 16, and 13.
Yeah. So we did a lot of work on floor 13 because this did. And so then the question is where did all this start to occur that we see in these videos? Okay, so now we can go on. I'm trying to give people a bit of an understanding.
Right.
There's a lot of people that ask, what was in that building? Well, this slide shows us by floor by floor.
So on the top, it was mechanical floors that I guess the workings for the building. Then Solomon Smith Barney was on 28 to 25. Then there was Standard Chartered Bank. Then there was the IRS, Department of Defense, and Central Intelligence Agency on floor 25, 24. And on 23 was the Office of Emergency Management. On 22 was the Federal Home Loan Bank of New York. On the 21st was the First State Management Group. From 19 to 21 was ITT Hartford Insurance Group. On floor 19 was the National Association of Ubzi Commission. I don't know what that's a Securities Valuation Office. 18 was the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Floors 14 through 17 were vacant. But on 11 through 13 was the Security and Exchange Commission and the Provident Financial Management. And then just below that was the U.S. Secret Service, and then the American Express Bank. And now what is the significance of that is highlighted here in yellow? What is highlighted is the Security and Exchange Commission and the Provident Financial Management. What is the significance of that?
Because there was a fire there.
Oh, that's where the fire was.
So why not ask yourself, okay, if this is so important, how much paperwork is going to be laying around? So at the end of the day, we have to be confident that those documents were locked up every day. If you put it on that question, just that question alone, the probability of a fire propagating, and it didn't propagate very fast through that whole system. I mean, we're talking about hours here of hardly any fire at all. So then the question is okay, what's going on there? So I highlighted it just to pose a question of thought.
So you'd think they would have sprinkler systems. It would be really tightly managed. It's a really important top secret kind of stuff. And they wouldn't allow it to just be susceptible to a fire.
Well,
no,
is what you're saying.
No, they wouldn't. And even if it was a fire, if it was the other condition, and they did, the fire indications that they didn't scatter around. So what was the I guess the conditions for the what am I trying to say? I'm concerned about what was the fuel for keeping the fire burning.
So you're saying, yeah, what was, they say office furniture.
Not so much.
It was all blue spruce.
Okay, should I go to the next slide?
Oh yeah, of course, you bet.
So this is from your study, and this is I guess a mock-up of the building, of this building. This is the actual building, and this is your mock-up.
Yeah, and looking at it earlier today, I was thinking, I should have made it the same width in terms of the people looking at it.
Right.
But basically, this is the structure, and it's broken down by 2 different computer programs to simulate precisely the erection of that building. And so when we look at this for a moment here, we're going to see that it begins to collapse. And we're going to compare my work against the actual footage that occurred that day.
Okay, so let's watch that. So here's what actually happened. Wow, you can see the penthouse collapse first. Which
Absolutely, on both.
Which doesn't make any sense, but here we go. Okay. So do you want to say anything about that?
I just wanted to put this out here for this discussion to let people see how well we were able to compare our work in relation to what happened that day.
Okay. So next slide.
Yes.
Okay. So now here's another mock-up. This is the National Institute for what?
National Institute of Standards and Technology.
So this is their simulation we're going to show now. Is that it?
That is correct, against this actual footage on our left.
Okay, let's watch. So this is how it actually fell down, and here's what they said happened. Well, that's not what happened at all. So this is what they're saying happened, and we can see that's not what happened.
Correct.
So just like the vaccine came, from a pangolin. I mean, the virus, and then it got printed in Nature magazine. This is a con job.
A lot of stuff has turned out to be a con job just across the board in academia, like psychology. A big one turned out to be a big scam. Bunch of people been faking stuff for a while.
So this looks like, this doesn't have any resemblance to what we just saw, correct?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
And more important than that, NIST basically is in position to make sure that when we put up buildings, that we have a code that protects the public. My profession is to ensure that when we design something, it's going to be there and it's going to stay and not hurt anybody. This is a remarkable, I mean, when the code doesn't get changed and you're saying all this stuff is happening, it just makes no sense.
Yeah.
So you're saying that a fire made this building collapse like this, and they didn't change the code afterwards?
No, not in regards to the safety or any of that kind of stuff. If they're going to say it, there's got to be a change,
right,
to improve it. But there's never been another steel building in the world that has come down because of fire.
Never.
Is that right?
Especially in its own footprint. So here's the next, and this is so this is still the NIST.
Yeah, and what I want to say about that is that they simulated to the right of this picture on our left, basically the connections of the columns to the beams, but they didn't on the left. So there's a difference.
So you're saying here they connected to the columns to the beams, but they didn't here?
No, they made an assumption.
Okay.
What's called pinned or fixed. And so that's between the two. And you'll see on this picture when it's coming down, that line represents the two differences.
Okay.
Which doesn't represent the building.
Let's watch. Okay. So this is your study, and here's the actual footage. Let's watch. So now what does that show us?
It shows it's coming down in its own footprint. It's showing it's coming down in free fall. It's showing that there is something that enables it to come down evenly. In other words, through its own gravity.
Right.
Drop. Okay.
And fall into its own footprint.
Correct. And mine simulates the same thing to within, I didn't drop it all the way down, but
right.
But anyway, it represents what we're talking about.
And so should I go next slide?
Hell yeah.
Okay, so this is your study, and this is the actual footage.
Before we jump, look at the upper left of that. See that?
Right
that
here?
was the penthouse coming down.
So so this is what actually happened.
Through the 45th floor. That's why I had that 45 in there.
Okay.
That's way above any reported fires.
And so,
that wasn't a fire.
That wasn't a fire. Doesn't make any sense.
No.
And so, and then it just falls straight down.
Right. Now, I probably ought to tell you something about the building. If we look down on top of it, that building is not a rectangle. It's got basically a trapezoidal kind of shape. And I don't know if I put a picture in there to discuss that for a moment or not, but I think I may have. Let's go on. If not,
it's
an important factor. Yep.
Okay, let's.
There we go again. Same idea. Yep.
It sounds like they're looking at your graph.
Yeah.
Whoa, that was.
So there's been another study by a physicist who also has done an evaluation of free fall, and my calculations fall right on top of his verification of how it dropped.
So the fact that it fell at free fall speed is significant because that means that there was absolutely no resistance in the building structure and no steel beams, which doesn't make any sense, correct? That there wouldn't be any resistance because the whole building wasn't on fire. There was just a part of the building. So that part would get weakened, but not the part below it, and certainly not the part up in the penthouse. So that for that to fall in free fall doesn't make any sense, correct?
Correct.
And so why do you think the NIST said that it did make sense?
Well, I'm not going to go there.
Okay.
Because,
all right. Okay.
Because
all you can say is it didn't.
Why did they say that?
Why did they say that? Right. Okay. So want to go to the next slide? Here's this one.
Sure. Yeah.
So this is the study for progressive collapse. I'll play.
Now,
go ahead.
One of the findings that I came up with, I said, we spent a year playing around with this whole idea of did this piece break? Did that piece break? Did this piece have problems and the other piece, which would have developed what's called a progressive collapse. We determined without a doubt that did not happen. A global collapse happened. So everything that you looked at so far was a global collapse. Came straight down, the whole structure.
Yeah. Which has never happened before or since in a steel building.
No,
has
correct.
never ever happened, but it happened three times on September 11th, 2001.
To one building that wasn't hit by a plane at all.
To one building that wasn't even hit by a plane. What a coinky dink, huh?
So I probably need to tell you something that really has bothered me lately. Is that if that's okay with you?
Sure. You think I should dye my hair?
No, I just so about 2 years ago, I was contacted by email by a firefighter out of New York who was there that day. And he said, "Is it okay to contact you?" And I said, "Here's my telephone number. Call me." And so we spent about 2 hours on the phone, and I learned an awful lot about what happened that day because he was in the building for quite a while. And he brought something forth that I have dealt with for some time now, and I don't know the answer to the question, but I sure would like to know. And that had nothing to do with what I did, but it had everything to do with what happened that day. So he was there in that building, and I don't remember which floor he was at when he was telling me the story. But there was a gentleman in there that was measuring the amount of movement of the building every few minutes. And I'm saying, was that an engineer? Was that a structural engineer, or who was it? To this day, I still don't know who was doing it. It might have been a firefighter, but it's not a typical kind of thing that I would visualize a firefighter to do unless it's large structural systems on the outside of the building and they're worrying about it falling off and hitting people below. I don't know. But anyway, the fire marshal came up and said, "This building's coming down shortly." everybody out of here. And we want to be down on the corner of the corner where there's a restaurant. And they all met there and watched the building come down.
How did they know?
Well, it's an interesting question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I have been wanting to, for some time, have a meeting with the fire, everybody that feels comfortable to have a meeting from the firefighters, because, you know, they went through so much. I mean, they had loved ones, they had friends, they had people that have died already because of the situation they were in. It's all kinds of issues. And I don't want to drag them through that, but I sure would love to be able to understand what they went through that day, and the police force at a level that has not been brought out yet. I feel like the American people deserve it. And I don't want to drag them through anything they don't want to be drugged through. But at the same time, I sure would, if they would be happy to participate, I would be happy to help them participate.
So I've seen videos of firemen saying that there were large explosions, not only in Building 7, but World Trade Center 1 and 2, that's felt like they were coming from the basement, that it knocked them off their feet. And so
you hear that for sure.
And so I know you didn't study. I had this thought the other day as I was walking out of Burbank Airport. When the planes hit World Trade Center 1 and 2 and it hit it like in the middle of the building, and let's say it did melt that steel, well, wouldn't just the top of the building fall over? Why would the steel underneath it all of a sudden lose all structural integrity and collapse at free fall speed? Does that make sense to you as an engineer?
No.
So, and why do you think more people haven't questioned that?
You know, I don't know. I will tell you this, that when those two buildings started coming down, the engineering ASC, I think it was, came out and said, this is a collapse by like flat plates hitting, bang, 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 bang,
right,
coming down. Okay, that was the argument. When that argument came out, I was teaching structural engineering at UAF, and I turned around to my students and I said, that simply is not true.
Well, that's the whole idea is like, let's give them the benefit of the doubt that the jet fuel burned hot enough to melt that steel. Well, why would the buildings above where the planes and the fire happened, why would this floors above it, why would it lose all its structural integrity too? Just like in Building 7, when the penthouse lost its structural integrity, even though there was no fire up there. The same thing with Building 1 and 2. Why would it collapse? Why would it just kind of fall over? Because it's like if you take out the knees of something, it doesn't go down like that. It would go over like this or like that.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. So here's the other thing. How at the end of the day, this building was struck, the Twin Towers, 1 and 2, was struck by planes. Yet, if you take a look at a plane and its resistance to any structural system, such as they're light gauge steel. I mean, I've been told that things like ice and things in the air can do a lot of damage to the hull of that plane. That being the case, what do you have going into that building? You've got speed. You've got a structure that's significantly less because it's been designed to be light to begin with. And the structural engineer designed these buildings to resist a plane hitting it.
That's right. So people don't know that. They actually constructed World Trade Center 1 and 2 to be able to withstand a jet flying into it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so all of that adding up, and then there's other kinds of things that we've heard recently, and there's a book out by one of the former flight attendants that was scheduled to go out that day, and and there's all kinds of things, and there's also discussions. I don't know where the truth is. I mean, I haven't done any studies on some of this about the fact that there were no people in those planes. It was all done by remote, and if that's the case, and that was what was written by this flight attendant, that brings me to a place that it breaks my heart that all these people were actually on the ground instead of up in the air. And I mean, that was bad enough, but on the ground, and then we've never heard from them since. That really, 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 really bothers me.
You think they wouldn't just let the people be killed? like they'd really go to the trouble of not killing the innocent people?
Right, I know. So
that doesn't make my happiness about our country very good.
That's understandable.
Well, they didn't launch an investigation into what happened on 9/11 until about 2 years after 9/11. And then when George Bush and Dick Cheney testified, they testified in secret behind closed doors, and they had to be together. George Bush couldn't be by himself. And there was no transcript of it, and they were not under oath. Why would they do so? And you're not allowed to ask questions about any of these things because they'll call you a truther or they'll call you a crazy person. But it was just like with the Seth Rich investigation. I remember I was on a news show called The Young Turks, and at the time they billed themselves as the biggest online news show in the world. And I asked Ben Mankiewicz, who the host of the Turner Classic Movies, and Cenk Uygur. I said, can either of you remember the last time reporters weren't allowed to ask questions about an unsolved murder investigation by the FBI? And they didn't know what to say to me because no, there never was before and there never has been since. You can ask questions about the Kennedy assassination, Robert Kennedy assassination. You can ask questions about anything, any open murder investigation where they don't know who did it. But you couldn't ask questions about Seth Rich. And why was that? Because they didn't want you to. Because if you did, you're going to find out that something they didn't want you to find out. And now we know, years later, we know that the FBI actually has the laptop of Seth Rich. They first lied and said they didn't have it. Then they lied and said they couldn't get the data. Then they lied and said they had the data, but now they have the data. They're not going to release it for 65 years. So it's the same thing. So when you're not allowed to ask questions about something and they shame you for asking questions, just like during COVID, just like during Seth Rich, just like 9/11, they're hiding something. And when the president of the United States and the vice president have to testify about what happened during the biggest terrorist attack in the history of our country, and they have to do it in secret, not under oath and off the record behind closed doors, that should raise a red flag for everybody. But again, because the media is consolidated, and if you ask those questions, their attack dogs will come after you and try to discredit you and ruin your career. And that's why you were able to do this, because you were at the end of your career. And what could they do to you? You already got your pension. So thank God for that, I guess. Kurt, you wanted to say something?
So that thing that always makes you laugh when you bring about Rumsfeld announcing they can't find $2 trillion.
So
that was the day before this.
So the day before this happened,
he announced it.
The Secretary of Defense gave a press conference where he said that they could not account for $2 trillion, not billion, not million, $2 trillion. And the irony is, or the damn the luck, the coincidence is that the plane supposed plane that hit the Pentagon hit the office where they were trying to figure out where all that money went. So, Kurt,
so this is the AP. The Reuters is a good for a laugh as well. The debunking of that.
Okay.
Ready? See if you can pick out where it's gone wrong already. No, the U.S. government didn't mysteriously lose trillions of dollars the day before 9/11. Yeah, I thought they lost it all just that day.
Right.
That's what they're debunking. Not the actual thing that they still can't account for, by the way. And you don't think there was some accounting? From what I could see, there was some accounting being done in that Building 7 that collapsed.
Yes, in Building 7, there was the Securities and Exchange Commission and in there, and the CIA, and all that stuff got destroyed, so they could never look up those records.
I didn't think they lost it in one day like Brewster's Millions.
That's right.
Starring Richard Pryor.
Hey, let's...
Well, that's another reason why I put that slide in there for us to take a look at what was on those floors.
Right.
Because that brings to point wonder what really went on there. And then you go back to Oklahoma and something very similar on those floors. And you have to wonder, you know.
Oh, so you're talking about what, Timothy McVeigh?
Yes.
Yes, so that's also very sketchy. They're very, very sketchy. There was a second car, there was a second bomber, a second car. There's a lot of things. I just want to play this, and I didn't have time to load it into my keynote, but let me see. I'll just play it. It's 5 minutes long.
On the morning of September 11th, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters, directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop, directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York. While in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon in the budget analyst office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly, answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her, and her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about
his head could be seen to move violently forward.
And
they took the babies out of the incubators.
And
mobile production facilities.
And
the rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit paranoid tinfoil dog abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever.
Well, I didn't.
This has been a public service announcement by the Friends of the F.
Okay. So
wow,
I would have told you to shut up. 20 years ago.
So I know the guy who put that together is James Corbett, and he got kicked off YouTube
for this.
I don't know. I'm sure it didn't help. I don't know what they used to kick him off, but they did.
They showed Richard Gage on there. That's that dude from Grand Theft World.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So he has a lot more of those kind of videos about 9/11. He has one about Oklahoma, the Oklahoma City bombing. That so many things don't add up and make sense. But again, you're not allowed to ask these questions.
I would have brushed it all aside had it not been for the same goddamn play. You know, if they at the very least didn't try to use domino theory every year of my life as long as I've been alive, the thing that didn't work back before I was born, we're going to keep doing
for
this.
Vietnam, yeah.
I would never notice it. It's just like even a dullard can see a pattern. I guess you'd think.
So I really appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else? I mean, so we're not denying that there was a horrible event that happened on 9/11 or that those buildings fell down and thousands of people were killed. We're not denying any of it. We're saying that, who's really responsible, who's the culpable, how did it actually happen? Because Building 7 didn't come down the way they said it did. And I mean, if you just look at it from a engineering viewpoint, it didn't happen. There's no reason why the penthouse would come down first. That doesn't make sense. And again, before or said, even Rosie O'Donnell. I have a video of Rosie O'Donnell questioning this on The View from like 15 years ago.
Before she got her mind right.
Before she got her mind right.
She's a much happier person now. I don't know if you've seen her clips.
So go ahead, Doctor.
I was going to say, I think there's a couple other videos that I put on here, and one of them shows it collapsing at falling over as a progressive collapse. I thought we probably ought to share a little bit about that.
So let's watch this. I think this is now you're saying this is how it should have fell down.
I'm saying if you use what NIST says happened,
and I had the NIST.
Yeah, this is what would have happened.
Okay,
I didn't say that in my report, but the fact of the matter is, if a column over here on the edge of the building, like column 79, comes out and those around it comes out first, then they lose support, but the others are still there. So why is it going to stand straight up and come down in its own footprint? It's not going to happen that way.
So if it happened the way they said it, this is how it would go. Look, okay, let's
more
watch.
like it. Yes.
So this is how it would look.
And if you begin to see the top of it, this is not a rectangular building.
Right.
This is, and so the stiffness of it is not like a rectangle. There's parts of it that are heavier than others and all that kind of stuff that's going on. The stiffest part of this building is at the elevator shafts in the middle of it, the building. NIST argues the portion of the building to your right, if you're looking into it, is the exterior. And they said that that's really, really stiff and everything pushed from there. Not true. Actually, it's less stiff than the centroid of the building where the elevator shafts are.
So you're saying when you see the building fall like this into itself, they're saying that's because the edges of the building were the stiffest. You're saying that's not true, that the core of the building was the stiffest where the elevator shafts were.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the first thing we looked at. We said, okay, where's the centroid of this building? Where is the what I would call the thermal centroid of the building? In other words, if you heat something up, just imagine if you take a piece of steel and you have it and you hold it on one end and you heat it up, it's going to move away from that where you're holding it because it's stiffer there.
Right.
You hold it on the other end now and set it on fire, and it's going to go the other way because that's the stiffest point. Anywhere else in between, wherever you're holding it, that's the stiffest point. the stiffest point for the heating up the floor system was close to that thermal centroid, which was near the elevator shaft.
And so, go ahead. And so I just want to ask you, but you know, your colleagues, I mean, you're a well-respected, you were the head of the department, you had a great reputation. What has been the fallout of you doing this study and proving that this could not have happened the way the NIST said it happened?
Well, I guess we'll have to find out, won't we?
I mean, you've done this study, right? I mean, it's been out for a while.
Yeah.
What year did you release this study?
Well, I think it was 2000 and I think it was in 2020, something like that.
Okay.
You know, but anyway, it doesn't mean that I don't know. I know that the vice president is well aware of what I did.
You mean Dick Cheney?
Yes.
Well, that's all good.
That's that. that guy's pretty evil. He's got a lot of connections. And so, do you fear that someone will try to do something to you? Like who knows? Maybe an IRS investigation or something. What do you think would happen?
I don't know. You know, I believe in. I'm a Christian, and I believe in God. And if I'm going to do the best I can for the people of this country, and if I have to suffer for it, that so be it.
And so you're doing this as a service. Obviously, this isn't a moneymaker for you. This is a career ender for people.
No, I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I feel like the people deserve better.
Okay. And I guess I'm going to find out what's going to happen to me. So we'll see.
We probably won't be another Bohemian invitation.
Well, I have friends all over the world, so
okay.
You know, at the end of the day, it's I don't go out and try to create issues every day, but when I see an opportunity like this, I'm going to at least present what I think is the truth, and let the other situation be addressed.
So that local television station covered it. Did you get invitations to go on other local TV shows, or any other news organizations ever invite you on to talk about it? 60 Minutes, Nightline,
No.
Anybody?
No.
Interesting. Very interesting.
But I did get invitations from engineering that was in Alaska. I got invitation for doing it in Arizona,
like an engineering conference.
Yes, or engineering meetings, you know, that kind of stuff, where I shared what I had so that the engineers would have some understanding of where I came from with all of this. And there's an organization in the UK now that's looking at what we did, and we'll see where that all goes. So anyway, I don't know how to address the question you just gave me about not being invited to televisions and sets and all that. I don't know why. I tend to think that they are not always on the truth side.
Right, of course, because they're owned by the people who want to control the narrative, right? Yes. Especially in the United States, there's only 6 major corporations that control every news show, every television show, every radio show, every newspaper. The mass media is owned by 6 companies, and that was engineered by Bill Clinton in the Telecommunications Act of 1996. And so ever since then, all the people who are in media know that they have very few places to go work. And so it became very homogenized, and it became very easy to do all those wars. And so they used 9/11 as a pretext to go into Syria, to go into Libya, to go into Afghanistan for 20 years, to go and by the way, and Libya, and those, as Julian Assange told us, those wars are not to be won. Those wars are meant to be ongoing, because it is a money laundering operation to take money from the Treasury and disperse it through the international security state and the military-industrial complex and the billionaires who own that stuff. So that's what we've been living. I mean, we keep pretending that it's ISIS that are the terrorists, but the United States had killed a million people in Iraq. Look what we did in Libya. Same thing. And the most successful state in Africa, we turned it into a failed state. Look what we did in Syria. We got in bed with ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria to try to, and that was all for a pipeline. And we still occupy a third of Syria. As we wag our finger at Putin for going into the eastern part of Ukraine to stop Ukraine from shelling the Russian ethnics there. He invaded Ukraine, not to start a war, but to end one. And we're occupying Syria, which is right. We just built 2 military bases inside someone else's country. And which third of Syria are we occupying? We're occupying the oil part.
Absolutely.
And so this has been never ending. And then General Wesley Clark revealed on Democracy Now! That he went into the Pentagon after 9/11 and they already had a plan to go into Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, Libya, and I think there was 2 more, Somalia, and I think there's Afghanistan. And so they've done most of those. The last ones are, I think, Lebanon and Iran are the ones that are left on the list. And they're trying to do that right now. They're trying to engineer a war with Iran and Lebanon, and they're trying to do it through the Israel-Palestine conflict. They're saying that Hamas was funded by Iran, and that gives us. And if any proxies of Iran attack U.S. soldiers, that's an attack from Iran. And so this has been. There's a document called the Prospect for a New American Century, and it laid out all this. And they said they needed they needed a Pearl Harbor, so they could use that as a pretext. So what they gave the President of the United States was called the AUMF, which is the Authorization for Use of Military Force. And that means he didn't have to declare a war if he wanted to go into Libya. He didn't have to declare a war to go into Iraq or Syria or Afghanistan. They didn't have to declare a war, get Congress to declare a war. He could do that because under the guise of him fighting, under the president fighting terrorism. So we've done all these wars without an official declaration of war. And it's just, we are the world's terrorists. That there's no other country that has done what we've done in the last 20 years or even come close.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate.
And to say the least. And we have over 800 military bases. I say probably 1,000 military bases around the world. No one comes close to that. And a lot of them are secret also. But anyway, I really appreciate your courage, Doctor, and I appreciate you coming on this show. And I appreciate you, sharing your knowledge of engineering and your impeccable reputation and putting it on the line to tell the truth about something like this. And, the idea that you're not allowed to ask questions in the United States of America about anything should be a red flag to everybody. But what they do is they go, "Oh, you're just asking questions. You one of those?
One of these guys?
What are these guys? You're
just asking
I'm
questions.
just asking questions. What else are you supposed to do? That's what you're supposed
What do you
to
mean
do.
Just
asking questions. I know.
That's a hostile act.
Yeah.
Let me share something else with you before we go.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be on the air. So one of the things that happened almost at the very beginning.
Well, I just want to let you know we are on the air. We're live.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
So at the very beginning, when the building went down, all 3 buildings went down. What happened immediately after that? They looked as fast as they could to get all that stuff hauled away.
That's right.
That is not the way you handle anything that collapses. I mean, I've done a lot of building collapse evaluation of failures, and the first thing you do is you put it back together, or you examine what may have created the problem. But if you don't have the material there, and why didn't you have the material there, then you're violating the very issue that you should be using to make a determination of what truly did happen. And yet in the dust particles, they found thermite that was unexploded.
So thermite is an explosive
Oh my gosh.
that they use to implode buildings, correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, it can certainly take the temperature up to about 2,700 degrees F. I mean, it's pretty, or I'm not exactly sure about that number, but it's pretty high. It's to the point that if you look at what happened in the rumble piles, that was not a typical fire.
Right.
So,
well, I appreciate you. Yeah, that's exactly. They did the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do, and they also their investigation did the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do it out in the open. They did it behind closed doors, in secret, and it wasn't under oath, and it wasn't recorded, and it's just crazy.
Absolutely.
So everything says there's a cover up, and you aren't being told the truth. And the first thing they had to do was make sure that anybody who had a question about it was called a crazy and a truther. A truther. They turned the word truth into it. That's so Orwellian. They turned the word truth into a negative.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
that's just crazy.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have to move along. I really appreciate you again coming on. Dr. Leroy Hulsey did great work at the University of Alaska Fairbanks and debunking the official story of how Building 7 came down. According to you and your research, and you have impeccable reputation, it didn't come down the way the establishment and the government
didn't realize
said.
it was another building for many years.
Right.
I thought two buildings went down for most of that time.
Most people didn't know there was a third building that came down.
Why is it called Building 7 if it's the third one?
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense. Sorry.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it.
betcha.
And if I remember up in Fairbanks, I'll look you up.
Thanks.
I've been up
Appreciate
there
it.
twice.
Oh, you have?
Yeah,
Awesome.
I did a New Year's Eve gig in Fairbanks. It was, and why was I up there for New Year's? Because I have that good of an agent. And it was 42 below when I was there. 42 below. And the joke I wrote about it, when it has to warm up 70 degrees just to freeze, that's cold. Anyway.
So when you go back, go up there in July.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to do it. All right, doctor, we got to run. We're way behind, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, you bet. Take care.
Hey, everybody, I'm going to tell you about a product sponsor. It's EnviroCleanse, and they're having a huge holiday sale, and I'm going to tell you how to get a discount in a second. But I'll tell this. Let me tell you I've told this story before. I'll tell you it again. It smelled like mold in my bedroom, and when we moved into our new house, and it smelled like mold, and I was afraid I was going to get sick from it. And I had people come in, and the mold people couldn't find the mold, but it smelled. And so I get this EnviroCleanse. They send me one, right? And they want me to use it. So I put it in my bedroom. I come back from a weekend away doing comedy. No mold smell. No nothing. It's amazing. It's a great product. It's the one product I'm the most enthused about telling you about. And they say here that the best way to fight a cold or flu is to not get it in the first place. And that's why EnviroCleanse, it's the new science in Homer air purification. And with a limited time holiday sale, you'll save 30%. That you're going to need it. So why did I choose EnviroCleanse over all the others? Well, because they gave it to me. That's why. That's how I chose it. But they tell me here because EnviroCleanse is proven to capture and destroy cold and flu viruses other purifiers miss. It destroys cold and flu viruses. EnviroCleanse military-grade technology wipes out bacteria, toxins, and mold that can make you sick. That's why the Navy chose EnviroCleanse to protect the air on board its Navy ships. Did you know that? Get EnviroCleanse for your home. Right now, you'll save 30% during their holiday sale, plus get fast free shipping. Visit ekpure.com and use the code Jimmy30. That's for 30% off. So that's ekpure.com, and the code is Jimmy30, ekpure.com. We're doing live comedy shows in Oxnard, California, Venice, California, Palmdale, California, Omaha, Nebraska, Des Moines, Milwaukee, Lansing, Michigan, Bend, Oregon, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, and Boston. Plus, we're going to put a date in Edmonton, Canada, plus Vancouver. See ya. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets.